On the reaction this week, after King Charles announcing he has cancer, was he right not to share the specific diagnosis?
And after Prince Harry's dash to see his father, could this crisis lead to reconciliation with his brother and the rest of the royal family? Royal biographer Tom Bower joins us to give his opinion.
And away from royal news, as a mother is convicted for involuntary manslaughter over her son's mass shooting at a school in America, should parents be held responsible for their child's crime? And
there's already an almighty row growing over Tucker Carlson's interview with President Putin. Is he right to be giving airtime to the man at war with the West?
And remember her, Holly Valance? She was once a star of Neighbours.
Yeah.
Is she the unlikely saviour of the Tory party?
Hello and welcome to The Reaction with me, Sarah Vine.
And me, Andrew Pearce. We're here every Wednesday on Daily Mail's YouTube channel, so make sure you like and subscribe so that you never miss an episode.
And we're starting this week's reaction with King Charles's shock cancer diagnosis. I was accused of being a bit brown-nosy, but I did say on Monday when I wrote my column that I hope he would get well soon.
What's wrong with that?
Well, apparently that's a bit creepy-crawly, but I would like to reiterate that message. I hope he gets well soon.
He's a father, he's a grandfather, he's a husband, and also he was heir presumptive from the age of 3.
I know.
And how terrible and ironic that only 18 months into his reign, he's been struck down with cancer. I think it's really, really sad.
Supporters across the world have sent messages of encouragement to the King, as well as praising his break with royal protocol to share details of his diagnosis. But you think he should have gone further?
I do actually. I'll tell you why. Because it was incredibly transparent to tell us he was going to hospital to have checks on his prostate, which he had an enlarged prostate. All very well and good. Complete contrast with what had gone on before. George VI didn't even know he had lung cancer, which killed him.
I mean, I think people probably did know because he used to smoke 5 million cigarettes a day, so it was probably quite likely.
But they never got around to telling the monarch, and we know that the Queen had. We think the Queen had bone cancer, but of course her death certificate said old age.
Yeah.
So the King was transparent to a point, and then he became more opaque with the cancer by saying he's being treated for cancer. The speculation is lurid, Sarah. You might as well just go the whole hog.
I love you, but I really disagree with you. I think that sometimes people do have to keep a part of themselves private, especially if you are like him in the, completely, he's literally laid out on a gurney for everyone to see.
Yeah.
I think that maybe just keeping that little bit private. The thing is, if he'd said, or if the palace had said he's got bladder cancer or he's got this cancer or that cancer, then the speculation would have been just as bad. People would be going, oh, well, if you've got bladder cancer, then these are the prognostics.
What'll happen is, but what'll happen, it'll be like all these things. It'll be reported in the United States or in Australia. Like, remember with Prince Harry in Afghanistan, it was reported on an Australian website, so we then all reported it, even though we'd taken a vow of silence because we knew he was in Afghanistan. And I think people will find out because these things always happen. And I think, therefore, it's just easier. And I think they will actually come clean.
I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will. But I do just think that that he does deserve just this little smidge of privacy for now.
I sort of understand that, but and we wish him well, and we know the treatment has started. We don't know what hospital, we don't know what treatment he's having, and I think he's entitled to that privacy. And of course the Prime Minister blundered, didn't he? Because he said it was caught early on, and then they had to row back number 10. But I think he was probably only basing what he said on what he'd been told, probably by the King himself.
Yeah, who knows? Anyway.
Well, almost as soon as the announcement was made about King Charles's diagnosis, there was an immediate announcement that, guess what? Prince Harry was on a plane from California on the way to see his father. So could this be the start of a reconciliation for the prodigal Harry and his family, including his brother William? Well, joining us to discuss this is the royal biographer, Tom Bower. Tom, he wasn't there for long, was he? Barely 30 minutes the King granted his own son. Doesn't suggest much of a rapprochement to me.
I think that we should man who's behaved so disloyally and with such treachery to his face. I mean, I do not believe that he'll stay in Britain for long. I don't think there's anything for him in London. I do think it's interesting that given all the number of bedrooms they got at Buckingham Palace and all the other palaces in London, that he had to stay overnight in a hotel.
Yes, I did think that was very.
shows.
I thought that was quite telling because it's clear that
I thought that, and I do think, in the end, it was his father who took Frogmore away from him. So, and I would love to know, but the palace won't reveal, whether Queen Camilla actually met Harry when he called. My suspicion is, of course, she didn't, because she'd be unforgiving for his appalling treatment of her in his book.
Our understanding is that William won't see his brother at all, has just flat refused. Is that correct?
What Harry said about William and of Kate, and didn't stop, because after all, he must have briefed Omid Scobie that it was Kate who said this about the colour of their forthcoming child Archie. So, I mean, the Sussexes have a lot to answer for, and I'm really furious that he was even allowed to land in London and then given a special escort to Clarence House.
But don't you think this is a perfect opportunity for some sort of reconciliation?
No.
I mean,
You can't reconcile with a man who has made a living over the last 3 years of being such a traitor, of causing so much unhappiness. I mean, he really has, quite willfully. And he's not a boy, he's nearly 40. No, I think that the monarchy, in fact, depends on actually obliterating the Sussexes from our state of life, because their continuation is bad for us.
I'm agreeing with Tom. I agree. And I tell you the thing, Tom, I think the reason that meeting was cut short at 30 minutes, because the king cannot trust his son. He cannot trust that anything he says to him within the walls of Clarence House is not going to end up on an American TV chat show or in the next instalment of that ghastly book or in his next podcast.
But the thing is...
Don't you think that's right, Tom?
I agree with you. He doesn't trust him. On the other hand, he'd like to have some sort of reconciliation, because I do think Charles feels some guilt for Harry's unhappiness because of the marriage breakdown and all the rest of it. There's no doubt about that. But I mean, we've gone past that now. Harry has had his chance, so to speak, for revenge. It's a good title for a book. And now he should just get on and be a decent father and son.
Don't you think that there's an element of all this? I mean, I think Charles must be absolutely heartbroken by what's happened with Harry, because even as a parent, it doesn't. It's still your child. You still miss them, and you still feel terrible if they're. And it's clear that Harry is not a happy man. He's not. He's in terrible turmoil. And I just wonder, I mean, poor Charles has had so much stress over the last sort of 2 to 3 years, with the death of his mother, with all these family rows. Wouldn't it just be easier if they could all just sit down and just draw a line under it and just move forward?
Well, Sarah, I do remind you of that wonderful image in St. George's Chapel in that blissfully sunny marital day in May 2018, when Charles took Meghan down the aisle. And we all thought this is the beginning of a wonderful, wonderful new era. And then we panned to the congregation and saw it filled with all these unknowns to the Sussexes of Hollywood types who were going to be her new career. She never intended to stay in Britain. It was always for her intention, her plan to go back to California. And the king tried his hardest, as did the whole royal family, to make Meghan happy in Britain. But she was determined to find fault and behave really quite appallingly. So I don't think it's a matter now of reconciliation. Meghan is the last person to believe in reconciliation. Look at her treatment of her father,
exactly,
of her first husband, of her friends. And you've got to remember, Harry has no friends in Britain either. He shunned them from his marriage. And so the two of them are not in the mode for reconciliation, and we shouldn't kid ourselves that was ever on the agenda.
Quite right. That's Tom Bower.
I think...
The Royal Prophet. Tom, agreeing with every
Tom.
word. So
I'm not going to cross Tom.
Well, he's a great man. He's a great man, and he's written some terrific books too. So what do you think about Prince Harry making a dash to his father's side? Do you think the Royals, including Prince William, should accept his olive branch? Do you think King Charles should share more about his cancer diagnosis? Let us know at reaction@dailymail.co.uk.
In the US, a mother has been found guilty of involuntary manslaughter over her son's mass shooting, which left 4 school children dead. Meanwhile, the mum of Brianna Jai has said that she doesn't blame her killer's mother for her daughter's murder. So, do parents bear responsibility for their child's crime, Andrew?
Well, look, I'm not a parent, so it's much more difficult. But from my point of view, Yes, and especially in America, she's called Jennifer Crumbley. She'll be the first parent ever to be convicted over the child smash shooting. Look, there were...
She bought her
child a gun
and
when he
allowed
was
him
barely
free
16.
access to it, didn't
Full
she?
access to it, and also there were repeated warnings from him to
Yeah.
her and the father about his mental health. We all know now about the collapsing mental health of many teenagers, lockdown, all the other issues. Ignored. She refused to get help for him. She was at the school on the day of the shooting when the parents had called her in. She went home. She did not confiscate the gun. She has blood on her hands, and it's about time the courts got involved, because you can't rely on the politicians, because the gun culture in America is so deeply embedded.
Yeah.
More people have a gun than have a car.
And it's, but I think it's slightly different here in the UK. I mean, the thing about the Brianna Ghey case is that, I mean, I listened to every word of that trial.
And have you seen the brilliant podcast?
And I've seen, and we
Brilliant.
also, you should watch the Daily Mail's brilliant documentary on it if you have time. It's very, very good. But what emerged from that was that what corrupted the children, especially the girl, Scarlett, was their access to the web in general, and particularly the dark web. And as a parent myself, you do not know what your child is doing on your phone. Now, Brianna Ghey's mother has called for smartphones to be banned for under 16s, and I think in that respect she is right, because I think that access to the internet for an immature, unformed brain is probably as dangerous as handing them a gun or a knife and saying, off you go, do whatever you want. Because they don't understand the consequences of their actions. They cannot tell the difference between fantasy and reality. So many of them are raised on video games and stuff that looks real but isn't real, but is, you know, the blurring of the boundaries between reality and fantasy is part of what the internet does, and it's very scary because, you know, a lot of children just cannot make that distinction, and it would take a very, very mature child to be able to do that. Now, the thing about parenting, what I would like to say actually about all this is that parenting has changed radically over the last 15 to 20 years because of the internet. You know, in the olden days, if your child got in with the wrong crowd, you sort of knew that they were doing that because you could see evidence of it.
Put them on a curfew.
So you could, you know, they would be hanging out with the wrong people in the wrong part of town, or you could notice something in their appearance or whatever. Now there are none of those visible signs that trouble is happening. Because everything is in the privacy. They can be going anywhere when they're in their bedroom. They can be going to the darkest depths of hell. They can be seeing the most atrocious perversions, and you're sitting downstairs watching telly, having a cup of tea, thinking, well, at least they're upstairs in their bedroom, so they can't be getting up to that much. You know, no, that's not true. And parents need to realise that. And it's really hard. It's a really big cognitive shift that needs to make.
Why don't more parents say, hand over your device, I want to see what you're looking at?
Well, they do. I mean, for example, I was at a friend's house last night, and her daughter is 14, and she came and had supper with us, and then she went up to bed, and her mother said, hand me the phone. So you hand them the phone. So, you know, she hands over her phone.
And did she check what she'd been looking at?
And she has the passcodes, and she has all of that. Right. So even if you do all of that phone hygiene with children, the second they leave your house, the second they go to school on a bus, and a friend of them, you know, opens up their phone and puts on the porn or whatever it is. What I mean to say is it's very hard to control. It's totally the Wild West. And I mean, after Molly Russell killed herself a few years ago, I don't know if you remember that.
I do. That was being bullied on the net.
Very sad. I wrote a piece in 2019 saying we should ban smartphones for anyone under 16. You know, Rishi Sunak spends his whole time banning vapes because a smartphone is a much more dangerous thing for a child to have. And I really do think that Brianna Ghey's mother, who I think, by the way, has been an absolute tower of brilliance over all of this. I mean, she's got out there.
And she's not going to go away, nor should she. She's
really campaigning, and I think all credit to her and all, because she must be in bits. I mean, to be able to do that.
How does she get out of bed in the morning?
I think she's right. We need to address this situation, and we need to address it sensibly. And people will say, "Oh, you can't ban smartphones." Yes, you can.
But there's another element to the story, isn't there? Because the father or the parents of the boy involved in this case. Now, a lot of us are focused more on her because she got a longer sentence. Bought him a hunting knife. while they were on holiday.
I know.
Why would you buy a child a hunting knife? A large
I
blade.
have no idea
Why would
why
you
you
do
would do that.
And I think in the same way Jennifer Crumbley in America has been convicted, I think we've got to start looking at parents who think it's okay to put a lethal weapon in a teenager's hands.
But I mean, a parent who you know, is violent or who takes loads of drugs, or they're also responsible for their children. I mean, the thing is, children are the products of their parents.
Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, and I mean, inevitably, it's just a no-brainer. So, as a parent, you have to minimise the sort of dangers that you expose your children to.
Yeah.
And I think some parents think, and I understand this because I've thought this myself, that if I have the sort of controlled risk in my child's life, then that's better than than sort of banning them outright, because it will make them less rebellious. But it's just that doesn't really work in real life. Children need really clear boundaries. And one of the problems with being a parent in this day and age is that all of those tools that parents used to have been taken away from us. So when I was a child and I did something really stupid, my mother would smack me quite hard, or make me, you know, sit in a corner, or take away my toys or my whatever it is. If you did that now to someone, that would be child abuse.
They'd get on the phone to Childline.
Exactly. So we have to give parents the tools to discipline their children so that they understand the difference between right and wrong. And over the years, those tools have been taken away from parents because we're all told that we have to do child-centred, upbringing.
Aren't they making it a criminal offence to strike your child in Scotland?
Well, in Scotland, if you strike your child, you could go to jail.
Even if it's gently?
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
ridiculous.
So on the one hand, we say, oh, parents need to discipline their children more, and on the other hand, we say, no, you can't discipline your children. So which is it? You know, So it's a complicated thing. It's a very complicated thing.
It is. But I still get back to where we started with this. I think it is terrific what they've done in America to this woman.
I think it sets a really good example.
4 children murdered by her son.
I mean, I don't know why anyone under the age of 21 is allowed access to a gun.
You can't buy alcohol in America till you're 21, but you can buy a gun. So, you can go to school with a gun when you're 17.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem with the law, is that stupid people will do stupid things. Anyway, what's your view? Do parents bear responsibility for their children's crimes? Let us know at reaction@dailymail.co.uk.
Now, it hasn't even aired yet, but there's already the most almighty row over the journalist Tucker Carlson's announcement he's interviewed Vladimir Putin.
Most Americans have no idea why Putin invaded Ukraine or what his goals are now. They've never heard his voice. That's wrong. Americans have a right to know all they can about a war they're implicated in, and we have the right to tell them about it because we are Americans too. Freedom of speech is our birthright. We were born with the right to say what we believe. That right cannot be taken away no matter who is in the White House. But they're trying anyway.
Huge row.
Well,
and it's often a lot of journalists saying, why is he doing that, giving a platform to that man?
You may remember years ago when Donald Trump became president of the United States of America, my ex-husband, Michael Gove, who was in between cabinet jobs, went and interviewed him in America.
I do remember. I watched every bit of it.
It caused the most absolute... we had so much vitriol from people on the left. In fact, The Guardian published a piece written by a comedian called Stuart Lee, who was so angry about the fact that Michael had interviewed Trump that he said that being married to me or having sex with me as a Daily Mail journalist was a bit like having sex with a dead pig. And you can go; it's still up there. You can go and read it on the website. So the sort of...
Imagine if the Daily Mail had written that about somebody.
Imagine.
Read a bit the hue and the cry and the fuss, but the Guardian can say what they like.
No, apparently it's fine to say that about someone. Anyway, that's fine because I'm a Daily Mail journalist and I was married to a Conservative, so therefore I am no better than a dead pig. But what I would say is that I think when you get these controversial figures, it's good to hear what they have to say. Now, Putin is not the same as Trump. He is but many people think he's a war criminal.
Well, I do.
And so I think it is a slightly different scenario. But I think there is an element of what Tucker Carlson says, which is that, you know, no one's heard from him. We are at war with him. We need to know why we're at war with him. It is It's daring journalism. It's not necessarily, I don't know if it's good journalism, but it's I'm very interested.
If I got off an interview with Vladimir Putin, I'd jump at
Yeah,
the
it's a
chance.
scoop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And look, Americans have spent £60 billion on the Ukrainian war effort. Most of them don't know why they've spent that money. Britain, we've pledged £12 billion. So there's an interest for us to hear from Putin. I've got one reservation about it, though. He employs a lot of doubles. How do we know
it's actually him?
Is actually going to interview the real Vladimir Putin or the double? And also, although his English is good, you can be absolutely certain he'll have a translator there, and you always think something gets lost in translation. It also slows the process down and gives him more time to respond to the questions.
Yes, and I think the one thing that I would be very worried about is if it becomes a sort of propaganda tool for Putin.
That would be terrible for Carlson's reputation, so he can't allow it to.
So he needs to be very careful about
He has
that.
to put to him
He has to ask
that you
tough
are
questions.
a cold-blooded murderer.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what he has to do. And
Why
you're not
did
a
you
Democrat.
bomb that maternity hospital?
Exactly.
That's what he has to ask.
Yeah.
And how do you justify any of the things that you have done?
I would also like him to ask a couple of personal questions. Is he sick? There's a lot of rumours that he's very sick.
Has he had any plastic
What
surgery?
has he done to his face?
What has he done to his face?
I mean,
Exactly.
that could be the and finally question. We want to get to the serious stuff at the beginning,
So
but at the
let's
and
see.
finally.
We have to wait and see. I mean, if it is just
I'll be
a
glued
kind
to
of,
it.
What?
I'd be glued to the interview.
Yeah, I
wouldn't you?
mean, yes, but if it's just a sort of, strokey,
I think Tucker
soapy
Carlson's
thing.
got too much to lose here.
Yeah.
And the journalists who are complaining, crying wolf, they're complaining because they didn't get the interview.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really realise that Putin was up for interview.
Well, probably nobody asked.
I mean...
And we have heard a lot from Zelensky.
An awful lot. I mean, people have been to visit Zelensky. He's been, he's been in Parliament.
And there are all sorts of rumours of corruption swirling around Zelensky, and generals are being removed.
But I suppose if you go back to that basic principle that you don't give terrorists airtime, that we had all those years ago with the IRA and things like that.
But he is an elected president, albeit he's rigged the election, because I think he probably got about 88% of the vote. But nevertheless, he is legitimate, and there is a public interest in what he says.
Well, let's find out.
What's your reaction to his answer? Do you agree that he should be interviewing Putin, or is it outrageous to give a platform to a blood-stained despot? Let us know at reaction@dailymail.co.uk.
Now, yesterday saw quite a strange event. The launch of something called Popcons, which is not some terrible, pop band, but it's Liz Truss's new vehicle, what she terms popular conservatism. And the unlikely star of the show was one Holly Valance, who you may remember from Neighbours, and she had this to say.
I would say that everyone starts off as a lefty and then wakes up at some point after you start either making money, working, trying to run a business, trying to buy a home, and then realise what crap ideas they all are, and then you go to the right.
So I think that was Lloyd George, wasn't it, who said if you're not a socialist when you're 25, you have no heart, and if you're still one when you're 65, you have no head.
Well, but it's funny because actually I was a Tory when I was 17 because my dad worked on the assembly line in British Leyland in Swindon.
Yeah.
Dad was always on strike because it was show of hands out, brothers out. Yeah. And I kept saying to my parents, you've got to listen to this woman called Mrs. Thatcher, who's leader of the opposition, because she's saying secret ballots before a strike. And of course they didn't. I voted Tory in the general election. I was still doing my A-levels. My brother looked over my shoulder in the polling station, shouted at me all the way home. So I must have done it right because I never got on with him.
But you famously have no heart.
No heart, of course.
No heart.
But Holly Valance is really interesting because she's married to Nick Candy.
Yes, who supposedly is the nice Candy brother.
Yeah, there's two of them, and they're hugely successful property developers.
Yes.
And I had a cup of tea with him before Christmas, and he said, I've got a really nice Christmas present for you, 2 bottles of wine. I thought, these are going to be so fabulous.
Yes, it's going to be...
Alcohol-free
Petrus.
wine. No, alcohol-free.
God.
Which must be very nice.
That's an actual insult. Anyway.
Because he was at the PopCon conference.
So
and the
why
suggestion
is he bankrolling them?
Well, I think he might be giving money because he was giving money to the Tory party, but he stopped when Boris Johnson was toppled. Right. And he now looks at Rishi Sunak and doesn't think it's working.
Okay.
And
so he's quite on the right of the political spectrum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As am I.
As are you, yes.
I quite like the Tories to govern like a Tory party.
But what about Liz Truss? Do you think she has any chance of coming back? I mean, is this I mean, apart from that, there's the worst name possible. I'm not going to vote Popcons.
Well, did Lazarus really make a comeback? I thought the irony of Liz Truss launching something called Popular Conservatives, she did it on the very day a poll was published giving her own personal approval rating minus 54%.
Yeah, I think
she
so.
makes Attila the Hun look loved.
I mean, I think I feel sorry for her in many ways because it's been a disaster, but I do think that she is deluded if she thinks that she can make any form of comeback. I mean, I think the last thing the Conservative Party needs is...
And there weren't very many Conservatives there. And the one thing I thought was quite conspicuous, the very time she was making her speech, and let's be honest, if she was auditioning for a part in Doctor Who, she would get the Dalek role because she sounds like one.
Her oratory hasn't improved.
No, not in the slightest.
No.
But at the very moment she was speaking,
so do you
Kwasi Kwarteng, who was her Chancellor, and now he was standing down as an MP at the next section. Was he trying to steal her thunder? Because, of course, she sacked him. Because they had been very close.
They had been very, very close. I think he's very bruised by what happened there.
Yes, he would be.
But do you think Holly Valance is going to go for a career in politics?
I think she's fascinating, isn't she? Because she's popular, she's an Aussie, and the Tory party would snap her up if she'd run as a candidate, although showbiz people don't tend to do very well in politics.
I think that it would be...
Giles Brandreth? Didn't get very far, did he?
Well, he's a lovely man and he's a very good entertainer, but it doesn't mean to say that
Glenda Jackson, the higher she rose, was Transport Minister and in Labour.
Ronald Reagan was pretty good.
He was great.
He did it.
Yes, he was, actually.
He was an actor.
Yeah, he was an actor. And Tony Blair was a bit of an actor.
Yes, and arguably Trump is the biggest showman on the planet. It could possibly work. I don't know. The thing is, to be in politics, you need deep pockets, and she is married to a man with deep pockets.
Yes, and I thought, as you move to the right, I wonder if the fact that you've married a right-wing Tory with billions of pounds in your pocket have anything to do with influence her political outcome.
Who knows? Let us know your reaction.
And if you're watching, Holly, because we know you do, come on next week. Come on, tell us about your fledgling political career.
Anyway,
Sarah could give you a lot of advice. Don't do it.
Do it. Do you think Holly Valance could be the unlikely saviour of the Conservatives? Let us know at Reaction.
Do you think anything can save the Conservatives?
No.
Right, that's clear. Now, we want to look at some of your views and comments because some of you are so charming and delightful about us, particularly me, or no, particularly Sarah. So this is the reaction to the reaction. Last week, we talked about an imminent immigration boom, like 6.5 million. This story got a lot of you talking. Leah on YouTube said, totally agree with Andrew on immigration, and most things actually. Thank you, Leah. If British people won't take menial jobs, then stop their benefits. Simple. Quite right.
Mavis, are you sure that wasn't you putting that comment up? Mavis on YouTube says, I think immigration is a complicated issue and I am not personally against it, but I can't see how we can cope with so many people. Just on the basics of school, hospitals, housing, etc. And I agree they have to integrate with UK culture. Very sensible, Mavis.
Which they often don't.
No.
And Helen on YouTube says, this American strongly sides with Andrew. Hooray! Regarding immigration, I first visited London in 1969, didn't return until 2022, and then again in 2023. What a huge difference in that span of 54 years. I returned to Finsbury Park in London and found it unrecognisable, so packed and so crowded. She's right.
Yeah. On Labour's promise to ban all forms of conversion therapy, Jeannie on YouTube says, Keir Starmer will never get my vote. How can I vote for someone who cannot even tell what a woman is? Correct.
Now, this one has got me absolutely hopping mad. Last week it emerged the Clapham chemical attacker had twice been turned down for asylum and he had a conviction for sexual assault. But having suddenly converted to Christianity, you get it, you guessed it, he was allowed to stay. Well, surprise, surprise, we now learn 40 asylum seekers on the Bibby Stockholm barge down there in the West Country have now done the same. And 4 of them, Sarah, have been baptised this week. This is outrageous. They're playing the system, and I blame the wretched church for going along with it.
Well, I mean, the Archbishop of Canterbury has made it very clear that he doesn't agree with... He's very opposed to the Rwanda bill. He thinks that we should have an open door policy. And the great thing for him is that if these people are converting to Christianity, this is pushing his numbers up, which are abysmal.
How long will they convert to? For 2 weeks?
I have no idea. I mean, I would say genuinely, if they really are converting to Christianity, which is quite a nice, kind religion, turn the other cheek and all that, then surely that's a good thing.
Yeah, but
I mean, won't it mean that they will not,
No, what it means is that they will then be allowed to stay here, and then they'll disappear, and they can offend. They can. They've broken the law.
Throwing acid in somebody's face is not a very Christian thing
no,
to do,
it
is it?
Not.
Let's be honest.
So much of his
so
Christianity.
Clearly, he's not genuinely a Christian.
And how many others are not genuinely Christian? Because 40 asylum seekers on the Bibi Stockholm, that's 1 in 7 of them. They've all found God. Praise the Lord. It came down from heaven. Who is this magnificent
preacher? Do you think the Church of England has like a sort of recruiting stall, like when you go to university and there's a recruiting stall?
Perhaps it's the wise spiritual words of the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby. Perhaps he's managed to convert people with his zeal.
But one of the things I think that really upsets people generally about immigration is the way that it is that they see people playing the system.
Yeah, exactly what they're doing.
And this is an absolute classic example of people playing the system to do anything in order to be allowed to remain. And I find it personally, I mean, I'm not a massively religious person, but I do find it really offensive in the sense that, for some people, for lots of people, their religion is a serious matter. So to see it sort of prostituted in this way,
it's shameless, actually.
Is actually really offensive as a Christian. I don't think people should just be allowed to show up, and I don't think the Church of England should be, I will use that word again, prostituting itself like this for the sake of, a political agenda, which is what it is basically doing.
And they are conniving, in my view, with people who've broken the law by crossing the channel illegally. They're seeking asylum, but they've broken the law coming here in the first place. Why did they leave France in the first place, which is a safe country? So
but also,
the Church of England is working cap in hand with lawbreakers.
The thing is, there's nothing wrong with the Church of England being present and helping them.
Sure.
There's absolutely fine, the charity and all of that kind of stuff.
They could offer them prayers when they get back on the plane to Rwanda.
But I think it takes more than just a sort of, oh, hello, I've decided to be. I remember many years ago when my ex-husband was Justice Minister, and so in charge of prisons, there was a spate of people converting to Islam in prisons because that meant that they had certain privileges, prayer rooms, certain types of food, concessions made for them.
Clever, isn't it? And
so there were a lot of people who were clearly not Muslims and had no inclination to become Muslims, basically declaring themselves Muslims. And it's a bit like, this sort of feels the same in reverse, and it's also a bit like men who go to prison for rape and sexual assault suddenly thinking, oh, I'm going to become a lady.
Yes, I know.
I'm going to be a lady now, and therefore, because I'm a lady, I have to go to a ladies' jail.
Yeah.
And I'm not, that has happened.
It has. It happened in
numerous
Scotland. It happened in
occasions.
Scotland, and the so-called lady then raped somebody in the
Exactly.
prison.
So I think it's all part of the same basket, as far as I'm concerned.
And the Church of England is a basket case, and should get its act together. And remember, it's the Archbishop of Canterbury and the bishops are doing everything they can to derail the asylum, the Rwanda asylum bill.
Anyway, my thing this week is a little less sort of, I don't know, it's a bit more show busy. Have you seen the latest photographs of Kanye West and his wife, Bianca?
How could you not see
It's so
them?
weird. What is going on there?
Well, she's virtually naked.
She's virtually naked. So they are both going to something. She's wearing a transparent Macintosh with nothing on underneath. He's wearing what looks like a tarpaulin, which I'm sure is a very expensive item
it's a very
of fashion.
expensive tent.
And a mask, a black mask. It's really, really creepy. Well, I mean,
it felt to me, looking at it, like she was doing this under duress. It felt to me like I can't know.
Do you think she's under some sort of coercive control?
Yes,
thing?
it's exactly what it
there
felt
was that
like.
awful incident in Venice where they were photographed in what looked like a sex act on a barge.
And he would know, as one of the world's most photographed men, that the cameras were on him.
Exactly.
And he was performing the sex act, and I think he knew...
No, she was performing the sex act.
That's right. And again, that's a form of subjugation.
So it feels like he's just publicly humiliating her the whole time by making her walk around naked and making her cross certain really boundaries that you shouldn't cross in public. It's just really weird.
It is weird.
And the sort of strange thing, which is that she has this very uncanny resemblance to his ex-wife, Kim Kardashian. So that in itself...
She doesn't have such a large bottom.
Well, we only know that because we see it all the time.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's just
we saw
very,
it
it's
naked.
very worrying. It's a bit like the Britney Spears thing.
Yeah.
You just look at them and you think, oh, God, what is going on there? Anyway, let us know what you think. And that's it for today. Join us again next Wednesday, for more reaction to the stories making the headlines.
And make sure you like and subscribe so that you never miss an episode. See you again next Wednesday.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.